Hello and welcome to Journalists Hangout UK. This is a show where we discuss issues, both African and worldwide, which are affecting the continent. And we look at how those issues are seen at home and in the African diaspora. I'm Thamsanqa Zhou, and I'm pleased to welcome a very competent panel: Juliana, Olayinka, a journalist and broadcaster; Vuyiswa, Ngqobongwana, a broadcaster; and Ayo Johnson, journalist and specialist in African affairs. Now, let me start with you, Juliana. This is a week where we saw extraordinary events in the northern part of Nigeria, where, you know, the 110 girls that were abducted, where they were kidnapped back in the early days, and we were told now that 104 of them have been released. Just your reaction to that?
Well, you know, I'm a mother, and even if you look at this on a humanitarian level, I think this is good news, of course. You know, if you think of the parents finding out their children have been kidnapped, the fact that they've been returned is great. But of course, you don't have to be a fool to realise there's lots of speculation, conspiracy theories surrounding this whole story, conflicting information from Amnesty International, from the military, from the Nigerian government. How were these girls released? We heard from the information minister saying, you know, that there wasn't a negotiation as such, as there wasn't a ransom paid. But a lot of people were worried that there was, and we know that once you negotiate with terrorists such as Boko Haram, of course they use this as a reason to kidnap.
Okay, Vuyiswa, you have worked with NGOs before. We know that sometimes they have a role. What we are being told now is 5 of the girls who were part of those that were kidnapped on the night didn't make it.
That's true.
And there is still one girl, we are being told, that is still there. What would be going on now in terms of negotiating to make sure that at least that girl is brought back home?
Well, I think like anyone who's not in on the actual mechanics of what's happening, all we can do is speculate. And from what I've read and been able to understand, it looks like those 5 girls who are reported as dead were killed in the rush to get them out, as opposed to anything more nefarious than that. And that's really the most unfortunate, sad thing. But the thing I take away from this whole story in terms of where we're going is that whatever the situation, I think the Nigerian government and whoever is involved are getting closer to some kind of working rapprochement with this situation, because the release was quick, right? Oh, sadly, 5 girls died, but we have to get to a point where some negotiation is happening, because it's a stalemate, and the people that suffer are young girls who these people are arguing, no, they should not have Western education because it's going to spoil them. And one was killed for not giving up her faith, I read somewhere. So nothing is confirmed, but I do know one thing. The Boko Haram issue cannot be swept under the carpet. It has to be dealt with, because it has been ignored for 50 years, I'm sorry to say.
So Vuyiswa is talking about negotiations as a method, one of the methods that are available. There's a military option, there's a negotiation model, and then we still have the Chibok girls that are still missing, over 100 of them, probably as part of that. And we understand there might be different factions within the Boko Haram. How do you see this whole thing, Ayo?
Well, what's quite clear is that the Nigerian government is not on top of this, because the speed at which those girls were taken, the mechanism, the fact that they were taken to several different locations and further moved on. In fact, when I read up, it meant that some of them were put in boats. There was thoughts that they may be taken to Chad. And of course, there's huge concern that the Nigerian government has lost control. But they have a barrier of communication that's open. There's no doubt about that, because Boko Haram have been able to negotiate with the government and release these girls. But the question is, what's to stop Boko Haram from doing it all over again? So next week we will have another 10, another 100 taken up. Where does the government go from there? So I think there's some huge questions about the security of the country, the ability of the government to be able to control and influence and protect its citizens. But more so, Boko Haram is even more stronger than it ever has been.
Juliana, you spoke about being a mother. You know Nigeria very well. What do you think needs to be done to either reassure them or make sure that they are safe, given that Ayo is saying another attack could well happen.
Yeah, of course. Well, the security measures need to be improved. I think that the military said, and this was first reported by Amnesty International, that, you know, there were warnings because we know that there are chains of communication between the government and Boko Haram. The government were warned that there could be an attack on Dapchi, and there were military there, but the military were removed from there. Now, this again is all speculation, but that's what has come out from the official Amnesty report. So there does need to be more security measures in these points. If you know, for example, that there are schools that are in the middle of nowhere and it's in a predominant Muslim area and Boko Haram are active there, we need security to be there. You can't stop, you know, what they want to do and the ideology, but you definitely can have military at the schools. But then again, that's another question about the military, because we know they're underpaid, morale is low, they don't have the equipment to fight Boko Haram. Many of them are scared. Some of them, they see Boko Haram attackers and they flee because they don't have the equipment and the support to fight them.
Good point to bring.
Addressing the political human rights concerns of people in the north of Nigeria is long overdue. That's the bottom line.
Probably to do that, Vuyiswa, you have to understand the people that are behind these attacks, maybe Boko Haram. Are we talking about two different factions with two different behaviors? Are we talking about an ideology that can be arrested by or contained by the government? Who are they? What do they want? How can the government deal with that?
We're talking about an ideology that has arisen because of the failure of central government to address the issue, which is rooted in their own ethnic prejudices and dynamics. But at the end of the day, this is the chicken coming home to roost. Isn't it time it was addressed as the real issue it is? Who cares what faction is, you know, what version of Boko Haram this? The bottom line is the northern part of Nigeria has been systematically, continuously, over 5 decades, been underserved by a central government that is supposed to address the needs of all Nigerians. Come on, let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's a challenge. One would argue that probably there were people that led the country that were from the north who could have done more. In terms of the security, we are seeing that, okay, we're talking about the northern part of Nigeria, northeast in particular, Borno and Yobe and Adama. But when you look at also what's happening across the country in Benue, Kogi State, Taraba, so there are other clashes that are different. What are the security challenges before Abuja administration?
When you're dealing with ethnicity, when you're dealing with religious violence, because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, this is what it is. It's a degree to an extent of religious violence for which Boko Haram has hijacked a religion and said that everyone has got to conform.
I don't think that's a fair statement.
But
they haven't hijacked anything.
Well, nonetheless,
except schoolgirls.
We have, fair enough, but nonetheless, what we do have is that this saga has been going on for too long. Well over close to a decade now. We can no longer say that Boko Haram is not a force to be dealt with. We can no longer say that the government is able to control them. We've had successful different types of governments. We've had Goodluck Jonathan who tried, failed. We've had Buhari, who's a Muslim himself, trying, failing. So I think it's reached the time when they should say Boko Haram should come to the negotiating table, see for one hand what we can do to address their needs, and for them to disband or give back their ammunition.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line. Really.
If you were advising government, the Nigerian government, what would you be telling them in terms of what they need to do to solve this problem?
Start acknowledging your failings.
Which are
lack of addressing the issues to do with poverty, treatment of people in northern Nigeria, the way the resources are flowing. Let's be real. Let's put the facts on the table.
Can I just add something as well for you? Because, you know, a lot of Boko Haram militants that have been captured, many of them say, you know, they ask them why did you become a member of Boko Haram? And they said, Boko Haram killed my father. I went to the police for help. There was no assistance. I joined Boko Haram. So sometimes it's not just a religious, it's moved away from being a religious kind of war.
Which is
it's a war against the administration. It's a war against poverty. It's a war against, you know, being isolated.
Well, absolutely, and that's what needs to be addressed, because you've just insulted Islam when you said they've hijacked Islam.
I'll prove it to you. If
when they haven't hijacked Islam.
One of the girls who's actually kidnapped at the moment, who's remained, is a lady, it's a girl who's refused to convert from Christianity.
That's what we're being told.
So hang on a second. if it wasn't religion, she would be free. She would be home right now.
Line so these people have used their faith, which is what keeps them going through all kinds of trials, to find a mechanism for asking the government to deal with them. And they use their faith as guidance. It may be misguided in your opinion, but it's still their faith.
This will probably be a conversation that is happening at home, in Nigeria and abroad. But we will take a quick break. But there's plenty more that we have to discuss, so please join us after a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Journalists Hangout UK. I'm Thamsanqa Zhou, and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel, Juliana, Olayinka, Vuyiswa, Ngqobongwana, and Ayo Johnson. Now, we've been talking about what's happening in West Africa, in particular Dapchi girls, but now we want to go south, probably starting with Ramaphosa being a new president. In Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa is a new president. Nyusi in Mozambique is also a new president. Botswana, in the course of changing probably from Khama to Masisi and all that. Now, the Sadc region, and Tanzania, of course, is Magufuli, is new. Now, there's transition that has happened within the Sadc. New organization, new bloc.
I love what I'm seeing, because the last time Sadc was relevant was during the liberation struggle. It's funny how we Africans, well, humanity, when you're under stress, you find it much easier to work together. Now, after a period of so-called liberation, sometimes neocolonialism, but relatively speaking, we are free to do our thing. Now, in this new era, it's an opportunity to redefine the terms of engagement with each other. And now we have, on the one hand, the old school thinking, which is, hey, the African way is, hey, my family will run the show forever. Amen. Or you can get people who are more in the flow of what democracy actually means, and we do some political educating around creating a democracy that works for Southern Africa, because there are very strong issues to be addressed. Look at Zimbabwe. There are strong issues and contentions to be addressed. Fears that there could be a military sabotaging of the new government there. All kinds of issues. So I must commend Ramaphosa for being a unifying force, so to speak, with this goodwill tour that he recently did. I mean, the fact that it was his first tour after, being the new leader is a really great sign of encouragement. I think he's going to be the glue that holds them together.
Yeah, Juliana, let me come to you. I was mentioning, changes that have happened there. Angola, of course, also has a new president. And so the presidents that have been there the longest, or probably the leaders that have been there the longest, Kabila from 2001, he's only, 46 or so. And of course, maybe King Mswati, who himself is probably still in his 40s. So what would be the view of people in West Africa of what's happening in the Sadc?
Gosh, I think Africa, unfortunately, we look at what's going on in our own backyard, but I think Sadc is really important. And it's interesting hearing what you have to say, Vuyi. I'm not sure if Ramaphosa can be the glue, only because, there are whisperings amongst the ANC themselves, and whether or not Ramaphosa really is going to be the unifying force that's needed in Southern Africa. I don't want to kind of drift off topic, but if we look at what's happening with Zuma and the corruption charges that are going to take him to court, I think Ramaphosa and South Africa, because of their location and the strength in the economy, should be the glue that holds Sadc together. But then there is so much going on within the ANC, and of course the elections that are going to be taking place soon, and also in Zimbabwe. I'm wondering if that's going to steer us off course. There's a lot of talking in Sadc about, let's do this, let's do that, but then does it really come together? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Ayo, I'm still going on with the list. Zambia, Edgar Lungu is also a new president. Of course, he took over after the death of Sata. Now, when you look at the security aspects, although there have been political issues in the South, we haven't had the kind of challenges that we have seen in other countries. How do you see that stability being maintained with respect to the security question? Because if Southern Africa falls apart, then Africa will be in big trouble.
Well, Southern Africa will never fall apart. They've always been a beacon of success, and they've always led the way. And I think Sadc has shown several examples when they're capable of supporting every other country around them. But I think South Africa is so much a huge magnet that the attraction of jobs, the creation of opportunity, when it sneezes, the rest of Africa catches a cold. Clearly, South Africa, their position, their place, and their relationship with Sadc is key. For me, I think it's about trade. It's about how do we open up these borders so that we can have freedom of movement of people, freedom of trade, which has to an extent caused already rifts in Nigeria, another huge bloc who are concerned of dumping of cheaper goods on their market, which would displace their local economy. So I think if we can address all these fundamentals, which are always going to be key to Sadc's structure in terms of this unity that it professes and wants to, then I think the trade element is pivotal.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Vuyiswa, we were covering Sam Nyoma in Namibia. I was still going on with the number of leaders that have changed in Southern Africa. Namibia also has a new president, because of course after Nyoma, then Pohamba, and then Gab now. So where do you see the big issues being? Do you think Ramaphosa going to Namibia, taking over the chairmanship, Angola, the Sadc organ for security, and Botswana, the headquarters of SADC. Do you think he's just going around for fun, or he's actually stamping his authority?
No, he's going around to let them know, hey, this is a new order in South Africa. This is what I would like us to be, right? To be unified around economic issues like Ayo mentioned. At the end of the day, the EEC came together for economic reasons, not because they love each other. Right? But at the end, for Africa, especially SADC, if there could be more economic cohesion within that bloc, it would make a huge difference to the whole area. But then, as you earlier mentioned, Juliana, there's disparate types of governments within there. You've got, the ones who believe that they are royalty and it's just automatic. So there's a lot of political education that needs to happen to the people. And Ramaphosa is unifying them on the basis of the economic benefits that the region can get. And I believe that was the hub of the conversations in terms of practical issues. Because if you started getting involved in interfering in their politics, then we get, of course, like Juliana said.
Juliana, I have a friend of mine who is Nigerian, married to a Zimbabwean lady who was refusing that the kids go to Zimbabwe. One day he ended up in Zimbabwe, but once he was there, he's still there 10 years later. He refused to come back. He says there are so many opportunities in Southern Africa that most people in the West don't know. And of course, to Ayo's point about that free trade area and Nigeria opting out. How do you see these regions working together in the interest of the common peace? Because some people who are stuck to their regions don't really know what's there to offer in other regions.
Yeah, I think we need to promote Pan-Africanism. I think we need to think of, Africa as one nation, one place. And I think that can be an issue sometimes, especially we've seen it in South Africa with, migration and a lot of xenophobia. So people are afraid most of the time when people go to other African countries. It's because, they're poor, not really because they say, actually, I want to try another opportunity. If they want to try for a greater opportunity, they usually go to Europe and America. But I think we need to promote that. There has been discussions that there would be a SADC passport. We heard that there would be an African Union passport, which I think they've only given to 2 or 3 heads of states. But I think SADC are pushing towards that. And I think we need to start promoting that, not just governmental level, down to us. We need to say we're all Africans, as Nelson Mandela said, and I think that strikes a good point in the heart.
Yeah, Ayo, there was of course talk about an ECOWAS passport as well, but there are many Lebanese people doing business in diamonds in Sierra Leone, Liberia, those kind of areas, but not many Africans. So how do you think the issue of investment that people are talking about, because there will be new leadership in Sierra Leone, new leadership in Liberia, but there is SADC with the money that can actually be invested in that area?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with none of that you said, because De Beers, which is a company from South Africa, which is known around the world, is South African at its core. You may say that the supply chain, which is what you're referring to, is not controlled by Africans. So if we can control our own supply chain so that we get from manufacturing, from the raw material to the finished goods, we control the entire supply chain, then we stand a chance. But when the supply chain starts only when it gets into Europe, so we just deal with the raw material and then they manufacture it and sell it back to us, then that's when we don't have any control, because that doesn't make sense. So if these trade zones, be it at a Sadc level, which are just little regional levels, then sort of face off back to the African Union at a continental level, then I think we have a chance. We can have a chance where we can control our products, we can control our own markets, and we can dictate to those that we want to sell to.
Yeah, just briefly, Vuyiswa, where do you think Sadc is going, especially when you have free market areas and other needs and other bodies that are competing for space?
I think the beautiful thing that's happening and will inevitably happen is that all the contradictions that need to be addressed will pop up. Will pop up as the needs of the majority, so to speak, are being addressed. Because at the end of the day, you call yourself Sadc, and you're going to be questioned as a bloc. But if you don't speak as a bloc, then other things will come up, and then we'll address them.
That will be a good way to stop, ladies and gentlemen. Another way of continuing with the discussion, but don't forget to follow us on Real Journalists Hangout UK on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. I'm Thamsanqa, Zhou, and from the entire team here in London, thank you for watching and goodbye.